When I moved in with my new roommate, I thought it would just be a simple arrangement. Pay rent, split chores, and maybe watch the occasional game together. What I didn't expect was to share a tiny apartment with someone who could completely change the way I saw myself, my relationships, and even my future. He was straight, or at least that's what he told me. But one late night, I walked into our living room and found him sleeping on the couch with everything out. Vulnerable, unguarded, and beautiful in a way I wasn't ready to admit. That night started something I could never have imagined. A journey of confusion, desire, intimacy, and the kind of love that forces you to confront everything you thought you knew about yourself. This is our story. Ethan was never good at sudden change. He liked routines, patterns, and predictable outcomes. So, when his landlord raised the rent on his small studio to a price he could no longer afford, it sent him spiraling. He searched frantically for a new place, scrolling through endless online ads until his eyes blurred. Most listings were either too expensive, too far from campus, or worse, already taken. One night, sitting cross-legged on the floor with takeout cartons scattered around him, Ethan finally stumbled across a promising ad roommate wanted. 2-bedroom apartment downtown, affordable rent, easygoing guy. There was even a picture of the place. Modest but clean with hardwood floors and lots of natural light. It looked far better than anything else in his price range. Without overthinking, he sent a message. That was how he met Jake. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop near campus. Ethan arrived early, nervously fidgeting with the sleeve of his jacket until a tall figure walked in and immediately drew the attention of half the room. Jake had an easy presence, athletic build, messy brown hair, a hint of stubble, and a relaxed grin that made people want to smile back. He scanned the room, spotted Ethan, and waved. "You must be Ethan," Jake said, sliding into the seat across from him. "And you're Jake," Ethan replied, trying not to stare too long at the way his gray t-shirt stretched across his shoulders. They talked. Jake was a recent graduate working part-time while figuring out his career. He loved sports, played guitar, and hosted game nights with his friends. Ethan explained that he was in grad school for literature, which earned him a teasing smirk from Jake about being the book guy. But despite their differences, the conversation flowed. Jake cracked jokes easily, and Ethan found himself laughing more in that hour than he had in weeks. By the end of their coffee, Jake leaned back in his chair and said, "I like you. You seem chill. Want the room?" Ethan blinked, surprised at how quickly things moved. "Yeah, I'd love to." And just like that, they became roommates. The first week was all about settling in. Ethan took the smaller bedroom, filled it with stacks of books, and hung a few posters to make it feel like home. Jake's room was bigger and more chaotic. Sports gear piled in the corner, a guitar leaning against the wall, laundry never fully put away. Their shared spaces quickly reflected their personalities. Ethan kept the kitchen spotless, while Jake's sneakers always seemed to end up by the couch. Still, it worked. They divided chores naturally. Ethan cooked most nights, and Jake volunteered to do dishes. Bills were split on time, and they even fell into a comfortable routine of watching movies together a few nights a week. But there was something Ethan hadn't anticipated, something that unsettled him in ways he didn't want to admit. It was the way Jake carried himself so effortless and unguarded. He walked around the apartment shirtless after a run, sweat glistening across his chest. He lounged on the couch in loose shorts, one leg hanging over the armrest, laughing at his phone. Ethan tried to keep his eyes on his book or the TV, but more often than not, he caught himself watching Jake instead. At first, he brushed it off. Admiring your roommate's physique wasn't unusual. Everyone noticed attractive people. But the way his stomach twisted, the way heat rushed to his face, told him it was more than casual observation. Ethan was gay and he knew it. But he also knew Jake wasn't. That made his attraction dangerous. So he buried it. He avoided staring too long, forced himself to laugh off Jake's constant teasing, and retreated to his room whenever the tension became too much. But denial could only go so far. The breaking point came late one night. Ethan had been tossing and turning in bed, restless from the noise of the rain tapping against the window. Finally, he gave up on sleep and padded out into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. The apartment was dark except for the faint glow of the street lamp through the blinds. That was when he saw him. Jake was stretched out on the living room couch, fast asleep. A blanket had slipped to the floor, leaving his body uncovered. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, the faint rise of his abdomen catching the dim light. The lines of his muscles were unmistakable, his skin bare and unguarded. Ethan froze in the doorway, the glass forgotten in his hand. His breath caught in his throat. He should have turned away immediately, should have respected Jake's privacy, but his body betrayed him. His eyes lingered, drawn helplessly to the sight before him. There was nothing staged about it. Jake wasn't posing or trying to impress anyone. He was simply there, natural, raw, vulnerable in a way Ethan had never seen. The sight pulled something deep inside him, something he had been working so hard to keep buried. His pulse thundered in his ears. He felt a rush of shame, guilt, and something else he didn't want to name. And then Jake stirred. His eyes fluttered open, squinting against the dim light. For a moment, confusion clouded his expression. Then he blinked and focused on Ethan standing there. "Can't sleep." Jake's voice was low and groggy, thick with sleep. Ethan's heart stopped. He fumbled for words, heat rising to his cheeks. "Yeah, just water." Jake yawned and shifted, making no effort to cover himself. If anything, he seemed unfazed by the situation, as though Ethan's gaze meant nothing at all. His casualness only made Ethan more flustered. "You?" Ethan asked quickly, desperate to shift attention away from himself. Jake shrugged, his voice soft. "Guess I crashed out here after the game. Couch is comfier than it looks." Ethan nodded, gripping the glass like a lifeline. His instincts screamed at him to leave before he embarrassed himself further. "Right, well, good night." He turned sharply and disappeared into his bedroom, shutting the door behind him. His chest heaved as if he had been running. He pressed his palms against the door, trying to calm the storm inside. That night changed everything. The next morning, neither of them mentioned it. Jake was his usual self, cheerful and teasing as he made coffee, but for Ethan the air felt heavier. Every glance, every brush of Jake's hand against his arm carried new weight. The easy comfort they had built now buzzed with tension Ethan couldn't ignore. Had told himself it meant nothing. Jake was straight. That moment on the couch was just bad timing, but deep down he knew something had shifted between them. Something that couldn't be undone. Ethan thought he could push the memory of that night aside, file it away in a corner of his mind, and carry on as if nothing had changed. But no matter how hard he tried, his body refused to cooperate. Every time he saw Jake, stretched out on the couch, towels slung low on his hips after a shower, laughing with that carefree grin, Ethan's heart skipped in ways he couldn't control. At first he told himself he was imagining it. Jake was straight, he'd said so himself. Any hint of flirtation or closeness was just his natural friendliness, not some hidden invitation. Yet something in there between them was undeniably different now, like a low hum beneath the surface that Ethan couldn't stop hearing. It became especially clear during their shared evenings. One Friday night, Jake suggested a movie marathon. He sprawled on one end of the couch, leaving Ethan with the other half. Halfway through the first film, Jake stretched and casually placed his legs across the middle cushion, close enough that Ethan's arm brushed against his shin whenever he shifted. Ethan tried to focus on the screen, but the warmth of Jake's skin burned through the fabric of his sweats. His chest tightened, his breathing shallow. Did Jake not notice? Or worse, did he notice and not care? When Ethan finally dared to glance sideways, Jake was watching him instead of the screen. Not with judgment or discomfort, but with something softer, curious. Their eyes locked for a moment too long, and Ethan quickly looked away, ears burning. Later that night, when Jake fell asleep with his head tilted back against the couch, Ethan lingered longer than he should have before retreating to his room. It was happening again. He was caught in Jake's gravity, pulled closer no matter how hard he tried to resist. Days turned into weeks and the tension only grew. Jake started hovering more. If Ethan was cooking, Jake wandered into the kitchen, leaning against the counter and asking about his day. If Ethan was working at the table, Jake pulled up a chair, plopping his laptop down beside him. Even if he had no real work to do, sometimes he'd find excuses to touch him. A playful shove when Ethan teased him back. A hand on his shoulder during a joke. Fingers brushing when they passed the TV remote. Ethan's mind spun. Was Jake doing it on purpose, or was this just who he was? Comfortable with physical closeness, oblivious to the chaos he caused inside Ethan's chest. The breaking point came one evening in the kitchen. Ethan was chopping vegetables for dinner when Jake leaned over the counter, close enough that Ethan could smell the faint mix of cologne and soap on his skin. "You've been quiet lately," Jake said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "What's going on with you?" Ethan kept his gaze fixed on the cutting board. "Nothing, just school." Jake tilted his head, unconvinced. "No, seriously, did I do something?" Because ever since that night, he stopped himself, then smirked knowingly. "You've been acting like I've got the plague or something." Ethan's grip on the knife tightened. His throat went dry. "I don't know what you mean," he said softly, though the words sounded hollow even to him. Jake moved closer, lowering his voice. "Look, man, it didn't bother me. You standing there in the middle of the night. It's not a big deal. You don't have to act weird about it." The kindness in Jake's tone made Ethan's chest ache. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it. Gentle, understanding, as if he already knew more than Ethan wanted to admit. "I'm not acting weird," Ethan muttered, but his voice cracked at the end. Jake grinned faintly, leaning back. "You're a terrible liar." Ethan's cheeks flushed. He wanted to confess, to spill everything he'd been holding back, but fear wrapped around him like chains. What if Jake laughed? What if he got angry? What if it ruined everything? So instead, he said nothing. The silence stretched until Jake finally shrugged and changed the subject, but Ethan could feel the weight of it lingering in the air long after. The following days only heightened the confusion. During a pickup game with friends in the park, Jake waved Ethan over to join. Ethan wasn't athletic, but Jake insisted, tugging him onto the court with an arm slung around his shoulder. Throughout the game, Jake's hand lingered on his back, guiding him, steadying him when he nearly stumbled. It felt protective, intimate, in a way Ethan couldn't shake. Later that night, Jake flopped onto the couch beside him, still sweaty from the game, and grabbed the remote. "We make a good team out there," he said with a grin, nudging Ethan's knee with his own. Ethan forced a laugh, but inside Heishest his heart was pounding. The turning point came on a stormy evening. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder rolled through the city, and the power flickered once before stabilizing. The two of them sat in the living room, the sound of the storm filling the silence between them. Jake had a beer in his hand. Ethan a cup of tea. Out of nowhere, Jake spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "You ever feel like you don't fit the mold people expect you to?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Jake stared at the rain-streaked window, his expression unreadable. "I mean, I've always gone along with what people expect. Dating girls, partying, being the fun guy. But sometimes I wonder if that's really me or just what everyone thinks I should be." Ethan's breath hitched. The words felt loaded, heavy with implication. Jake finally turned, meeting his gaze. His eyes held a seriousness Ethan had rarely seen before. "I've never told anyone this, but sometimes I'm not sure if I'm as straight as I say I am." The room seemed to tilt. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He searched Jake's face for a hint of sarcasm, some kind of joke, but there was none. Jake was dead serious. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. His mind raced, every thought colliding at once. Hope, fear, disbelief. Jake leaned forward slightly, his voice barely above the storm outside. "Does that freak you out?" Ethan shook his head quickly. "No, not at all." Jake studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly, almost relieved. He leaned back into the couch, eyes drifting back to the storm. But Ethan could feel the AE shift between them as strongly as the rumble of thunder outside. The tension that had been building for weeks had finally broken into the open. Jake had cracked the door, admitting his uncertainty, and Ethan stood at the threshold, trembling but unable to step back. For the first time, he wasn't alone in this. The storm outside raged on, rattling the windows with wind and rain, but inside the apartment, the silence between them was louder than thunder. Ethan sat frozen on the couch, his tea forgotten in his hands, while Jake's words echoed again and again in his head. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm as straight as I say I am. For weeks, Ethan had been torturing himself with doubts, wondering if he was reading too much into every smile, every touch, every lingering glance. And now here it was, an admission raw and unguarded that shattered all the walls Ethan had built to keep his feelings hidden. He wanted to say something, anything, but fear clenched his throat. What if Jake regretted saying it? What if he backtracked and laughed it off? Jake must have sensed his panic because he turned back from the window and met his gaze directly. His eyes, usually light and playful, were steady and vulnerable. You don't have to say anything. I just needed to be honest with someone, and I trust you. Ethan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. Thank you for trusting me. His voice came out softer than he intended, almost trembling. For a moment they sat there in silence, the storm filling the space where words failed. But then Jake leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. Can I ask you something? Ethan nodded, heart pounding. Do you feel something between us? Jake's voice was careful, testing the waters. Ethan froze. His instinct was to deflect, to protect himself. But the look in Jake's eyes, the openness, the hint of fear broke through his defenses. He couldn't lie, not now. Yes, Ethan whispered almost too quietly to hear. I do? Jake exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight he'd been carrying. A small smile tugged at his lips, both nervous and relieved. Good, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. The world seemed to tilt. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He wanted to believe it, wanted to grab onto the words and never let go. But disbelief warred with longing inside him. Before he could overthink, Jake's hand moved, hesitant at first. Then, firmer as it brushed against Ethan's, the touch sent a jolt through him, electricity sparking at the simple contact of skin on skin. Is this okay? Jake asked softly, searching his face. Ethan nodded, unable to trust his voice. Their fingers intertwined, tentative at first, then tightening as if both were afraid to let go. Ethan's chest ached with the intensity of it, the realization that this wasn't just a fantasy anymore. Jake was here, real and warm, choosing him. The next moment unfolded like something out of a dream. Jake leaned closer, slow enough to give Ethan time to pull away if he wanted to. Ethan didn't move. His breath caught as Jake's lips brushed against his gentle testing like the first drop of rain before a downpour. Then Ethan kissed him back. The kiss deepened quickly, fueled by weeks of tension, months of longing. Ethan had never dared to voice. Jake's hand came up to cradle his jaw, firm yet tender, and Ethan melted into it, his own fingers clutching the fabric of Jake's shirt as if to anchor himself in reality. It wasn't hurried or careless. Every movement was deliberate, exploratory, filled with the wonder of two people discovering something new together. Ethan had kissed before, but never like this. Never with someone who made him feel like the ground beneath him had shifted, like the world outside didn't exist. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Jake rested his forehead against Ethan's eyes closed. Wow, he whispered. Ethan laughed breathlessly, still dazed. Yeah, wow. For a moment, neither moved. The storm outside had softened to a steady rain, as if the world itself was catching its breath with them. Jake pulled back slightly, searching Ethan's eyes. I don't know what this means. I don't know what label fits, or if one even does, but I know I want this. I want you. Ethan's chest swelled with emotion too big to contain. He had dreamed of this moment, convinced it would never come. And now it was here. Real, fragile, terrifying, beautiful. I want you too, he whispered. Jake smiled, small but certain, before pulling him into another kiss. The rest of the night unfolded in soft confessions and quiet laughter. They stayed on the couch, wrapped in each other's warmth, talking in low voices as the rain pattered against the windows. Jake admitted his confusion, his fear of what others might think, but also his undeniable pull toward Ethan. Ethan confessed his own worries, how he had been terrified of ruining their friendship, of misreading every signal. By the time the storm passed and the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, they were still there together, curled beneath a shared blanket. Jake's arm was draped protectively around Ethan's waist, his breathing steady against the back of Ethan's neck. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt safe. Not because the world had become less complicated, but because he wasn't facing it alone anymore. He knew there would be challenges ahead, questions unanswered, fears yet to be faced. But in that moment, as the city woke to a new day, Ethan knew one thing with certainty. This was the beginning of something real, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. The morning after the storm felt different, brighter somehow. Ethan woke slowly, warmth pressed against his side, the unfamiliar weight of Jake's arm draped across him. For a moment he thought he was still dreaming. But when he turned, Jake was there, messy-haired, still half asleep, his lips curved into a soft, unconscious smile. Ethan's chest ached with something tender and overwhelming. He lay there for a few minutes, memorizing the sight, committing it to memory, because some part of him feared it might vanish once Jake woke up. But when Jake finally stirred and blinked awake, there was no panic, no regret, just a quiet grin. Morning. Morning, Ethan whispered back. They stayed like that for a while, tangled together in a silence that felt anything but empty. And yet, beneath the sweetness, Ethan felt the first stirrings of fear. What did this mean for them outside the apartment walls? That question was answered sooner than he expected. Jake's friends were the kind who liked to drop by unannounced, usually with beer and loud voices that filled the apartment. The first time they came over after the stormy night, Ethan and Jake exchanged a glance, both aware of the invisible shift between them. They hadn't defined anything yet, but the air between them carried a charge that wasn't there before. As his friends piled onto the couch, Jake slipped seamlessly into his usual role. The charismatic, easygoing guy, cracking jokes and flipping through channels. Ethan sat nearby, quieter, watching. Every time Jake laughed, every time his hand brushed too close, Ethan felt a pang, not of jealousy, but of awareness. One of Jake's teammates from college, a broad-shouldered guy named Marcus, nudged him during a lull in conversation. "So Jake, what's it like living with the nerd? He driving you crazy yet?" Jake smirked, shooting Ethan a playful glance. "Nah, he keeps me in line. Without him, this place would be a disaster." The room laughed, but Ethan caught something. In Jake's tone, an affection hidden beneath the joke, his chest warmed. But then Marcus added with a grin that felt sharper, "Just don't start holding hands or anything. People might get the wrong idea." The laughter that followed was light, careless, but it landed like a stone in Ethan's stomach. He forced a smile, pretending not to care while his mind raced. He wanted to see how Jake would react. Jake laughed too, but it was a little too quick, a little too forced. Yeah, don't worry. He's not my type." The words stung. Ethan knew Jake was protecting their secret, but hearing him deny it so easily twisted something deep inside him. Later, when the friends left and the apartment fell quiet, Ethan retreated to the kitchen, slamming cupboards louder than necessary. Jake followed, frowning. "What's up with you?" "Nothing," Ethan muttered, though his tone betrayed him. Jake leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Come on, talk to me." Ethan turned, anger and hurt bubbling over. "You laughed with them. You let them joke about us like it was some ridiculous idea." Jake's expression softened with guilt. "Ethan, I had to." "They don't get it." "I'm not ready to tell them." "I'm not asking you to tell them everything," Ethan said, his voice cracking. I don't want to feel like some shameful secret you have to laugh off." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Jake looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. For once, his easy confidence was gone. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just scared." The fight simmered into silence. Ethan's anger melted into something sadder, more fragile. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I get it, I really do. But if this is going to mean something, we can't hide forever. Jake nodded slowly, eyes full of conflict. I'll try. Just give me time. Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. The outside pressures didn't stop there. One afternoon, Jake's ex-girlfriend texted him, asking why he had been distant. Ethan saw Jake hesitate before answering, his thumb hovering over the phone. He didn't pry, but the knot in his stomach tightened. Later, when Jake casually mentioned meeting her for coffee, Ethan couldn't keep the hurt out of his voice. Are you getting back together with her? Jake looked surprised, then shook his head quickly. No, not at all. I just don't want to be a jerk and ignore her. Then why do you look guilty every time she texts you? Ethan asked. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because I don't know what to tell her. I don't even know how to explain this us. I don't know what we're. Ethan's heart clenched. We're whatever we choose to be. Jake's eyes softened, but his silence spoke volumes. The tension grew over the following weeks. Their private moments were still tender. Late-night kisses on the couch, whispered confessions in the dark. But outside those walls, Jake slipped back into old habits. Around friends, he laughed at jokes that cut too close. Around others, he avoided any sign of closeness. For Ethan, it was a constant push and pull between joy and pain. He loved what they had, but he hated the way it seemed to vanish in the daylight. The breaking point came at another party. Jake's friends had invited both of them, and though Ethan wasn't eager to go, he agreed. The night was loud, filled with music, laughter, and too much beer. Jake slipped easily into the crowd, chatting with old teammates while Ethan lingered near the edge. A tone point Marcus, the same friend who had made the earlier joke, slapped Jake on the back and said loudly, Man, I still don't get how you live with him without going crazy. He's too quiet for you. Jake laughed, brushing it off, but Ethan caught the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Then came the words that cut deepest. Bet your ex is glad you're not wasting time on him. I mean, no offense, but you're way out of his league. The group laughed and Jake joined in, though his smile was tight. Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. He couldn't stay there another second. He slipped out quietly, walking home alone through the cold night. When Jake returned later, he found Ethan sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the dark TV. Why'd you leave? Jake asked, voice careful. Ethan looked up, his eyes tired and full of hurt. Because I can't do this anymore. I can't sit there and watch you laugh while people tear me down, while they make jokes about us like I don't matter. Jake's face fell. Ethan? No, Ethan interrupted, standing. I don't need you to be perfect. I don't even need you to come out if you're not ready. But I need you to be honest with me and with yourself. Do you actually want this? Or am I just some experiment you're too afraid to admit to? Jake's silence was deafening. He looked torn apart, his lips pressed tight, his fists clenching at his sides. Finally, his voice broke through, raw and strained. I don't know if I can be what you need. The words hit harder than any joke, any insult. Ethan felt them, slice straight through him, his chest tightened, tears threatening to spill. Then maybe we shouldn't do this at all. Jake stepped forward, panic flashing in his eyes. Wait, no, that's not what I meant. Just I'm scared. Scared of losing my friends, of disappointing my family, of not knowing who I am. But I'm not scared of you. You're the only thing that feels right in my life right now. Ethan's anger cracked, replaced by aching vulnerability. He wanted to believe him. He wanted to hold on, but fear still lingered, thick and suffocating. I need more than words, Jake, he whispered. I need to know you won't run when it gets hard. Jake reached out, his hand trembling as he cupped Ethan's face. I won't, I promise. Just give me time. Please. Ethan closed his eyes, leaning into the touch despite himself. He didn't know if the promise was enough, but he wasn't ready to let go either. That night, they lay side by side in silence, neither fully asleep. The weight of the outside world pressed heavy on them, threatening to break the fragile thing they were building. And yet, even in the midst of fear and doubt, Ethan held on to one truth. He loved Jake, and deep down, he believed Jake loved him too. It would take time, patience, and courage to prove it. But for now, as Jake's hand found his beneath the blanket, Ethan allowed himself to hope. The week after Jake's confession felt like living in a different universe. Every moment Ethan spent with him was charged with something new, something fragile, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The routines they once shared had taken on a different meaning. Making breakfast together wasn't just about scrambled eggs and burnt toast anymore. It was about Jake brushing his hand against Ethan's when passing him the butter, or the way Jake smiled when he thought Ethan wasn't looking. Watching a movie wasn't just background noise anymore. It was Jake leaning closer, letting his head rest against Ethan's shoulder, his fingers curling unconsciously into Ethan's sleeve. For the first time, Ethan felt like he belonged. But with every moment of closeness came the quiet weight of unspoken questions. What did this mean? Were they together? Were they still just roommates who had crossed a line they couldn't uncross? And how long before the outside world noticed? The answer came sooner than either of them expected. One Friday night, Jake invited a couple of friends over to watch the game. Ethan had been nervous about it, unsure of how to act, but Jake reassured him. Just be yourself. Nothing's changed. Except everything had changed. Halfway through the night, when Jake absent-mindedly rested his hand on Ethan's knee, one of his friends, Trevor, raised an eyebrow. "Since when are you two this close?" he asked, smirking. Jake froze. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Trevor chuckled, clearly meaning it as a joke. But the silence that followed was heavy. Ethan looked at Jake, his heart racing, waiting for him to laugh it off or pull away, but Jake didn't. Instead, he glanced at Ethan just for a second and then back at Trevor. "Since recently," he said evenly. The room went quiet. Trevor blinked, then let out a low whistle. "Well, damn. Didn't see that coming." He shook his head, half amused, half surprised, before turning back to the TV as if nothing had happened. But Ethan couldn't focus on the game. He was too busy replaying Jake's words over and over in his head since recently. Simple, honest without apology. It was the first time Jake had acknowledged them out loud to someone else, and the weight of it settled deep in Ethan's chest. Later that night, after the friends had left and the apartment was quiet again, Ethan turned to him. "You didn't have to say that." Jake looked at him confused. "Say what? Tell them about us. You could have just laughed it off." Jake's expression softened. He stepped closer, brushing his thumb across Ethan's cheek in a gesture so tender it made Ethan's breath hitch. "I didn't want to laugh it off. I'm done hiding how I feel." Ethan's throat tightened. "Aren't you scared about what people will think?" Jake shrugged, though his eyes flickered with honesty. "Yeah, I'm scared, but I'm more scared of pretending I don't feel this. I've spent too much of my life trying to fit into some box that doesn't fit me. I don't want to do that anymore." "Not with you." The words hit Ethan like a tidal wave. All the years of doubt, the loneliness, the ache of wanting something he thought he couldn't have, they all seemed to dissolve under the warmth of Jake's gaze. He pulled him into a kiss, deep and certain, sealing the promise that had been building between them. The weeks that followed weren't without challenges. There were awkward questions from friends, confused looks from people who thought they knew Jake, moments when Ethan worried that Jake might change his mind. But through it all, Jake stayed steady. He held Ethan's hand in public for the first time on a walk through the park, his grip firm and unapologetic despite the stares they received. He introduced Ethan as someone more than just his roommate when a cousin came to visit, and at night, when they lay tangled together beneath the covers, Jake whispered reassurances that quieted every doubt Ethan had. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," Jake told him one night, his voice raw with sincerity. "I didn't expect this. Didn't plan for it, but I can't imagine my life without you now." Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. He pressed his forehead against Jake's, whispering back, "You don't have to because I'm not going anywhere." Spring melted into summer, and with it came a sense of ease neither of them had ever felt before. Their apartment, once just a shared space between roommates, became a home filled with laughter, warmth, and the quiet comfort of knowing they were no longer hiding from themselves or each other. On a warm evening in July, they sat together on the fire escape, watching the city lights twinkle against the night sky. Jake had his arm draped around Ethan's shoulders, pulling him close as they shared a bottle of cheap wine. "You know," Jake said after a long silence, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here with you like this, I would have laughed." Ethan smiled, resting his head against Jake's chest. And now Jake kissed the top of his hair, his lips lingering. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the steady rhythm of Jake's heartbeat ground him. The doubts and fears hadn't disappeared completely. He knew they never would, but they didn't matter as much anymore. What mattered was this: the boy who once seemed untouchable, unreachable, was here holding him, choosing him every day, and Ethan was choosing him back. Months later, Ethan would look back on that stormy night as the turning point. The moment when honesty broke through fear, when friendship became love, when his world shifted forever. Life wasn't perfect. They argued sometimes, they struggled to balance work and their relationship, and they still had moments of uncertainty about the future. But every challenge only proved what they already knew. They were stronger together, and as they sat on the fire escape that night, city lights glowing around them, Jake squeezed Ethan's hand and whispered the words that made his heart soar. "I love you." It was the first time he had said it. Ethan's breath caught, his chest tightening with a mix of joy and disbelief. He pulled back, just enough to see Jake's face lit by the glow of the city below. "Say it again," he whispered. Jake smiled, his eyes soft and steady. "I love you." Ethan laughed, tears spilling over as he kissed him, slow and full of everything he couldn't put into words. "I love you too." And in that moment, with the city buzzing around them and the future wide open before them, Ethan knew he had found not just love, but a home in Jake's arms. The straight roommate who once felt untouchable had become the love of his life. And this was only the beginning. Their story wasn't perfect. They had doubts, arguments, moments of fear, but they had something stronger. Each other. Ethan found the love he never thought he deserved. Jake found the freedom to be himself beyond any label. Together, they built something real, something lasting. And it all started the night one straight roommate slept with everything out, and another found the courage to see him, not just as a friend, but as the love of his life.